How would you like to improve your health and keep your family safe? You're listening to the Healthy Home Hacks Podcast, where we firmly believe enjoying optimal health shouldn't be a luxury. Healthy Home Authorities and husband and wife team Ron and Lisa will help you create a home environment that will level up your health. It's time to hear from the experts. Listen in on honest conversations and gain the best tips and advice. If you're ready to dive in and improve your well-being and increase your energy, you're in the right place. All right, here are your hosts, bowel biologists, authors, media darlings, vicarious vegans, and avocado aficionados, Ron and Lisa Barris.
Who doesn't love a good, binge-worthy streaming session? You know, a few years ago, Lisa and I found ourselves glued to the TV when we stumbled across the miniseries called Dope Sick. Loved it. You know, based on the book Dope Sick, Dealers, Doctors, and the Drug Company That Addicted America by Beth Macy, Dope Sick traces the origins of the prescription drug crisis in the coal mining town of Appalachia, Virginia. And while it's one of those stories that seems too sensational to be true, it's based on real events that happened and still are every single day in America. The story exposes the ruthless and unethical marketing of OxyContin by the Slacker family-owned Purdue Pharma Drug Company that contributed to massive and unnecessary addiction and death. It stars Michael Keaton, whose character is based upon a Tennessee physician who got addicted to opiates himself after prescribing them to his patients to alleviate their pain. Well, the well-intended doctor was assured by the pharma reps that this magic pill would alleviate patients' suffering with little to zero potential for abuse or addiction. But the rise of the painkiller, OxyContin, relentlessly marketed by Purdue Pharma, launched the opioid epidemic in the United States. How? Purdue Pharma preyed on people's pain.
And while this seems like one company's massive negligence and greed, it's far from. Many big pharmaceutical company owners and sales reps recklessly distribute powerful painkillers and drugs while downplaying the risk of addiction with just slaps on the wrist and zero liability, as in the case of the Purdue's 2021 settlement to pay $4.5 billion to mitigate OxyContin's misuse. But the deal also granted the slackers full immunity from lawsuits. They made over $10 billion selling OxyContin and never admitted wrongdoing or offered apologies to the victims of their drug. But they aren't the only culprit. In 2021, drug maker Johnson & Johnson and 3 opioid distributors agreed to pay a combined $26 billion to resolve thousands of lawsuits over the handling of addictive painkillers that created a U.S. public health crisis.
According to the American Medical Association in June 2023, the nation's drug overdose and death epidemic continues to worsen. The epidemic affects every state and continues to be driven by illicitly manufactured fentanyl, methamphetamines, and cocaine, often in combination or in adulterated forms. The CDC estimates that close to 1 million people have died from opiate overdoses since 1999. When you think of an addict, you often visualize a homeless person or someone in a crack house, not a housewife, a wealthy exec, or a successful CEO. Our guest today had never smoked a cigarette or taken drugs growing up, but when his teacher wife suggested he see an ADHD doctor, he never suspected that he'd be spending the next 10 years as a meth addict.
Dave is a dear friend. Not only have we known him for over 20 years, he was suffering from addiction when I knew him and was his roommate, but I had no idea. A few years ago, I received a direct message titled, "There's something I never told you." The message proceeded with a confession that he'd become a raging addict. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. In his words, "No one ever told me that the really dangerous shit doesn't come from the drug dealer. It comes from your family doctor." Dave is funny and one of the most brilliant people I know. He's extremely brave to share his story with us today in hopes that it will help someone listening who is either going through the same thing or knows someone who is.
Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Woohoo! Welcome to the show, Dave. We are so happy to have you with us today. This is emotional, I'm sure, for you. And I know that this is a big step for you to be talking on such a public platform about this. So our hearts go out to you for doing that. And I know there's going to be people who resonate and need to hear this message. So let's get started. Can you take us back to the beginning of your addiction journey when you were first prescribed what seemed to be an innocent prescription drug for weight loss and then ADHD?
Yeah. First of all, I was in my mid 30s, maybe younger, and my life was already going pretty well. I had a great career. I owned my own business. I had a condo on the water with a giant boat. I had a gorgeous wife, 2 little kids that I loved. But my wife was a teacher and she recognized some signs. And so she mentioned that I might have ADHD. So I went into the doctor, and the next thing you know, I got a prescription. Now, let me mention something before this happened. I used to rent ATVs, 4-wheel motorcycles up in Pismo Beach. And every time I did that, I had to sit for a 15-minute video telling me how dangerous these ATVs are and that I could get killed. Well, in my opinion, ATVs are not dangerous compared to some of these addictive drugs. Not only did my doctor make me watch a 15-minute video, he didn't mention anything. He did not mention danger. 0% of what he said to me was a warning. I just thought I was going to become smarter, make more money, and make me happier.
The magic pill, right?
But here's the thing. These pills, they work great. They're like a wonder pill. So I took some Adderall, and the very first day I went into a client and I was training about 20 people on how to build this software application. But I was also on my first week of Adderall. So I ended up in the 2 weeks of training, I wrote the app myself while on lunch and after work.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Unlimited, right? You felt unlimited, basically. Limitless.
Yeah.
Like that movie Limitless.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I felt awesome. I was super productive. So for the first, say, 2 years, that's how it was.
Mm.
But gradually, over time, it doesn't start to work as much. So you can either A, quit and lose all that awesome wonderfulness, or you can increase your dose.
Mm.
And a better man probably would have quit. But
Oh, no,
I
you're a
increased
better
my
man,
dose.
Dave. You're a solid man. You're here today, too. You're helping so many people. This is wonderful. And by the way, Lisa's right. You said at the beginning of the show, you are brilliant. You are brilliant.
And how do you quit? I mean, I'm sure that even your wife was like, wow, this Dave's sweeping the floor and finally, cleaning all this stuff. I mean, I'm sure it was like happy for everybody. Energy is a gift. So when you have all this energy, of course you don't want that to stop. I mean, I think that's very normal to feel that.
Yeah. And to be honest, after I increased from 1 pill to 2, it was still pretty good. It went back to how it was.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years go by. Now I need 3. And somewhere imperceptibly, I don't even know when it happened, between the beginning and the end of the 10-year journey, it started to be more bad than good. And it creeps up on you. You don't realize it.
Would you say that was like the halfway point, Dave? Like when did it kind of switch?
Probably the halfway point.
Halfway point. Okay. So that's a long time. That's a journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And my wife figured out before I did that it was kind of doing more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward a few years, I'm now maybe 7 years into it. I go on a business trip to Sweden, Norway. And in Norway, it was a pretty important gig for me. And I was all messed up in my sleep. And so that morning, I increased my dosage beyond what my doctor asked, prescribed to me. And it worked awesome. It was a 5-day class, and I did it for all 5 days. Then I got on the plane to come home, and I kept doing it. I was in the mode.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got home to the airport. I was so in the mode I sat in the airport with no sleep for 3 days straight,
Oh, wow.
continuing to write code on my laptop. In my mind, I was kicking it. I was killing it. I was writing awesome code. I was getting things done. I was being wonderful. That's just not how it was.
Oh,
The
wow.
code, after the whole thing settles down, the code I wrote was awful.
Oh,
Sure, I had a lot of energy, but at some point, once you're taking 3 or 4 pills, your judgment starts to go crazy.
okay. So you thought you were writing all this great stuff and it wasn't. Okay.
Yes,
And now are you taking at that point 3 to 4 pills a day? So you wake up in the morning and then you take them?
yes.
Okay.
And that was the amount I was prescribed, allowed to take. But at
Oh,
some
okay.
point, I went beyond what you're supposed to take.
Okay.
And so I would get the prescription once a month and I'd end up finishing it in a week.
Oh, okay. Oh,
And
wow.
for that week, I was so jacked up, again, feeling wonderful, think I'm accomplishing great things. But at the end of the week, I ran out. And so the next 3 weeks, I was dead. Just don't want to do nothing but sleep, couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus.
Did you do the doctor hopping thing? I mean, I've heard a lot about that where, addicts will hop around from doctor to doctor so that each doctor doesn't know how much they're taking.
I wanted to, but luckily I'm not that connected with not didn't have
Yeah.
enough initiative to do it. But I really came close to doing that.
Yeah.
So the main thing about it is it might go great for you. I know a girl who started taking Adderall. She's been taking it for 20 years. It's 1 pill every day, and it still works today like it did when she first started. But that's the exception. It's more like it's more like an opiate where you take some, you need more, more,
More.
more.
Yeah. Right.
And how does it affect if you had a glass of wine or anything like that too? Does it throw you off? That mixing or that combination, does that cause additional effects or not really?
I never did much of that. For me, Adderall was never a party drug. It was a work productivity drug. And I like my work and I like to be productive and I like to have energy. But it wasn't a recreation thing other than the fact that my work is recreational. But like I said, I was enjoying my work, but I wasn't actually producing anything all that great.
Yeah. I wanted to say something to circle back to what you had just said about, you weren't told at the beginning, you weren't told that this was even a possibility. So I was researching the show and I had looked up side effects of Adderall on WebMD and found a list that included dry mouth, weakness, stomach ache, weight loss, anxiety, more, and a bunch of other things, but no mention of potential addiction. So I hunted a little more and I stumbled across another article, not as popular, of a website that says Adderall is a Schedule II controlled substance, meaning that it has high potential to lead to dependence and abuse. Long-term use of prescription stimulants such as Adderall can lead to tolerance, which is when a person needs increasing amounts of a drug for it to be effective. In some cases, people who take large doses of Adderall for an extended period may become physically dependent on the drug. But you weren't told that. And it's
I
not
wasn't
even
told
on,
any of that.
yeah,
I wasn't told anything. Nothing about the downsides, nothing about the potential risk, nothing about the fact that there were no long-term studies to say, we know people could take it for a year or two and not die, but there's no studies on the people who've taken it for 20 years. And none of those are good outcomes. There's just very few of those that are good outcomes.
And when I think of Adderall, I think of kids, right? Is attention deficit hyperactivity. I think that's a drug that's given to children who can't sit still in school and, are hyperactive, right? So think of that, the effects of that when it's starting so young, 10 years for you, you were an adult, but a child as they're still developing and they get started on that really early, I would think those long-term effects have to be like excruciating.
Yeah, I've got a number of health issues now, and I've been looking up what the cause of the thing I have. And basically, drug abuse is one of them. So this stuff doesn't just ruin your marriage and ruin your job. One thing I forgot to mention is that episode where I stayed for 3 days in the airport. When I got into that place, I tuned out everybody. Lisa can probably remember when I was in a San Diego hotel and that was happening. So once I was in a San Diego hotel in a city where there was all sorts of stores to buy stuff. But I thought I was in a mode. To me, boy, I was in the flow. So I was so much in the flow. I called Lisa from San Diego. I called her in LA and had her ship me a bottle of water. I could have gone
Yeah.
downstairs to the lobby and got a bottle of water, but I was so into the flow, so I thought. But you can see it really skews your judgment. I'm sure you probably remember that.
Yeah, there were some crazy things, but we, like I said, me and the other guy that worked for you, Dan, we just said, oh, that's a Daveism. That's a Dave. That's just the thing, a quirky thing that Dave does.
So I wasn't sure if that was you watched Madonna, like I think she bathed in Avion water or something, and you were so inspired you wanted water delivered to you across the country.
No,
Well,
across
I
the
did do
state.
that. So
You would do that. So then take us from where it went from there. So now you're taking 4 pills a day. And by the way, why were you in the airport for 3 days? Was that by choice or was you had nowhere to go
no,
or
I didn't have, I was in the home airport. I was at home and I had a car in the parking lot. And my wife was wondering, hey, I thought you were supposed to be home Friday. But
Oh,
in my mind, my warped mind, I thought I was killing it. I thought I was in a mode, and
get
the
out.
judgment really gets out of whack.
Okay, so you could have gone home and been working at home, but you stayed in the airport and you slept there, just like on the
I didn't
benches?
sleep.
Oh, you
I
didn't
went for
sleep.
3 days and I just coded.
Holy moly, that's nuts.
I mean, at this
Okay.
time, doesn't security walk up to you at an airport saying, "Hey, what are you doing here, sir? This is like the third day in the row." You think they'd pick up on that?
They didn't. I was in the international
They're
section
like,
of LAX. They
yeah,
got good food there. It was great.
it was
But
great.
not that I ate much food, because when you're on Adderall, you don't eat food. I had I think one meal that entire 3 day period.
Oh my God. Okay. So that's very dangerous. You can get dehydrated. You can get all kinds of wow. Okay. So that's really scary. That does remind me so much of that movie, Limitless. So then what happens? How do you progress from there? Because you're thinking you're still in control, it sounds like right now.
Yeah, so you're thinking you're still in control. In the back of your mind, you kind of know this is crazy, but then you come off it, and now you can't even do anything. You can't function. It's like you're as tired as you can possibly get. Whatever the opposite of focused is, that's what it is. It's the most unenergetic, unfocused. I really couldn't do anything.
Right. Because your body's just shutting down, I'm sure. Right. It's so sleep deprived and
Yeah, because I'm used to taking these stimulants every day for years and years and years. So this is the part that kind of really stinks. For one, at the time, I had a great client, Toyota, and we were making a lot of money from Toyota. Me and my partner, John Sheehan, everything was going great. I was making more money than I ever made, and happier and loving the career. But as the more the Adderall kind of got to me, I started not picking up the phone because I thought whatever I was doing on my computer was wonderful, and I didn't need to speak to customers.
mm.
Which,
Mhm.
of course, speaking to customers is kind of what business people are supposed to do.
Right.
And I would be super late on projects. I'd be like, oh, in order to finish this, I need some extra Adderall. And I'd take extra Adderall. I'd write lots of code, but it was like a beautiful mind. It was like scribble scratch. It was just crazy.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that analogy in the movie was strong too. Like he's writing all over the room, and at the end of
ooh,
the day, you
yeah.
find out he's not really writing anything of significance, right? He's just crazy, right?
Yeah, that movie was one of my favorites. Yeah, it's so mind blowing because you think he's such this genius, and then you find out, oh my God.
And Dave, in addition to being brilliant too, I have to say you're a big personality. You'll do backflips in front of a crowd. I know your customers just love you, so they probably were perplexed when you weren't picking up the phone just to say hello because you're a very social person. So it's funny how it kind of flipped you that way to not even react to a person because you have a lot of empathy. You're really good with people.
Because
That's
you're just
strange.
in an altered state. You're in an altered state. You can't think. Were you really thin? Like, were you losing so much weight? I'm imagining if you weren't eating food and didn't bother you, was it like, were you looking unhealthy? Did people notice?
No, because I had 3 weeks to binge. So I'd go one
Oh,
week, overdo it, and then 3 weeks to sleep and binge eat. So
Okay,
I
gotcha.
actually got worse. I got
Yeah.
fatter.
Kind of like crash diets, which is what happens, right? People end up
Yeah.
gaining more weight for that very reason because your body wants to get back to that set point. Yeah.
So, Dave, you gave us a couple examples already. One of which was that you're at the airport for 3 days and didn't go home, and your wife wondered where you were. I can see that being very difficult in your relationship and potentially being running havoc to your life, right? And also, you mentioned the customer. Was there anything else that you wanted to share that maybe how this addiction wrecked your life and relationships and livelihood in general? Was there anything else?
Yeah. For one thing, every time I was coming off of it, while I was on it, I ignored my family. I wasn't a father or a husband. I was just a crazy person.
Just working, kind of ignoring them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I ignored to the extreme. Like they would come into my room or my office here, and I'd be typing away, and I wouldn't even turn my head. I thought what I was doing was so important and so just change the world that I thought I'd just stay focused and keep staring at the screen.
Wow.
So that's one thing. Another thing is you get a false sense of confidence. I remember when I was a kid in school, people would say they take drugs and walk off a building, thinking they can fly. It's kind of like that. But since I used it for productivity and work, here's what would happen. I'd have a project due, say at Toyota, on Monday, and I'm working on it. And then I'm running late. So on Friday, I start to take a lot of Adderall.
Mm.
I'm getting forward, I'm moving forward. I possibly could finish. For some reason, your judgment is so messed up. I'm like, well, let me do this other thing and I'll add that. Then they'll really be happy. And I'll add this other thing. You think you could finish 3 weeks of work in like 5 minutes, but you can't.
Hmm.
So those kind of things made me late, made me turn in crappy work, and I lost the client.
Ooh, yeah. You lost Toyota. They were like, we're done.
Yeah,
So that was a blow. Was your partner aware at the time that this was a problem?
he was. I'd say the only reason I got through this is because I had such a good supportive family and friends.
Yeah.
You know, my partner John, so he's now an expert on Adderall
Oh,
also
wow.
from the outside perspective.
Right.
And I know,
Was
like
he
to
like,
me,
Dave, cut back? Was he kind of trying to say, hey, cut back? Or,
no, he's kind of quiet. If I asked him, he would tell me.
right.
But
He wasn't gonna, okay. He wasn't gonna mess up. But when you lost the client, he didn't freak out. He wasn't like, it's your fault.
well, let me tell you the last portion of losing the client.
Okay.
Toyota is like about a 2 hour drive for me. And so sometimes when I go to work there for a few days, I'll stay in a hotel. So I did that. And after my 2 days were over, I was coding and I kept coding. I kept coding. I kept coding. Next thing you know, it's like Thursday.
Oh, wow.
I just was focused for that many days, not really accomplishing anything. The project I was working on was backwards. It was worse than when I started. And so nobody knew where I was. My family couldn't get a hold of me. And so finally, John Sheehan, the partner you were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and another friend of mine, Jordan, I'm now sleeping in the hotel. And all of a sudden I hear bang, 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 bang on the Marriott door. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was room service. And I just ignored it. And they go bang, 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 bang. And finally, after the 80th bang, I decided to get up. And that's when I found out it was Jordan and John. So at that point, Jordan goes, how many did you take? And I said, 6. He goes, no, I know addicts. You took 12. And so that was for me, losing Toyota and having my friends have to do an intervention like that.
Yeah.
That was rock bottom.
Okay. That was the rock
And
bottom.
so after that, I realized this is doing more harm than good. The thing is, it had been doing more harm than good for a long time at that point. Yet for some reason that's impossible to explain, I kept doing it. And I think
Right. Because you were,
it's really, yeah,
yeah, you were
it's really,
addicted. Yeah.
yeah, I was addicted. It's super easy to put into words how wonderful Adderall is. All drugs are wonderful in week 1.
Yeah.
So you'd listen to a radio talk show and some person would call and said, it was like a fog lifted, which it was. But I ended up being in 1,000 pounds of fog by the time this whole thing was done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Seems like that with so many drugs. I mean, really anything. I mean, even if you think about a smoker, just a smoker, it's never one cigarette a day. It's going to go to more and more and more. My dad smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day at his peak until he had a heart attack and never smoked again when the doctor told him, that's it. You're not going to make it if you don't quit. And that's kind of unusual that he was able to do that. Quitting cold turkey is not easy, but it was life or death for him at that point. But I'd say that's with so many of these addictive substances. It's got to increase, right? Usually it has to, because your body gets now acclimated to that new level. And in order to get that high or whatever it is you're getting from it, you need more, you need more. So that's the super dangerous part. So you taken 12 pills that time?
I have no idea. All I know is the bottle was empty.
Oh, wow. Okay. So then now what year was this? Were you into?
Oh, probably 10 years.
Okay. So
10
that was
years at
the
that
end.
point. That was the end of it.
Okay. So you never went to other drugs after Adderall?
No, but I can totally see how that could happen. Like I said, I'm kind of a dork and I'm not connected with anybody who would be able to get me meth, but meth is the next step up.
Oh, okay. We said you were a meth addict at the beginning because I thought you had said that. Okay. So no, it never went to meth. Thank God. Right. Okay. But that would have been the next, like Adderall. Would you say Adderall is a gateway drug to that? Maybe potentially?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, Adderall would lead to meth because like Adderall, when I research this, Adderall is a stimulant, right? So it makes you feel great, invincible. Whereas like the opioids that we talked about at the top, they're more of a painkiller relaxation. So those people get more like, I feel so good, but that's more of a mellow. And that would lead to probably different drugs for them, obviously fentanyl and things like that, I'm guessing, right? I've become an expert, Dave, researching for this show. I was like, I didn't even know.
One thing about Adderall that makes it slightly not as bad as opiates is the withdrawal portion isn't as painful. You just can't get out of bed. You can't move. So you're in bed for like 3 months, just waking up from the last 10 years.
Really? That's part of the detoxification.
When you've been on it that long.
Okay. 3 months. Did you have help or did you do that by yourself?
Family amazingly stayed with me through all that.
Oh, that is so amazing. Yeah. Support system is huge. And I know there's listeners that might not have that, that might not have a good support system. So we'll do some shout outs at the end of the show.
Well, you earned that, Dave, because everyone loves you, man. I've seen you interact with so many people and everyone thinks favorably of you. So that's why you had that, right? You earned all that family and friend support.
Yeah, exactly. You have a great family. Shout out to your wife. She's amazing. I'm sure there was some rocky times in there. I mean, I'm sure there's got to have been some knockdown, drag out fights that must have happened, during that period. Like her, probably, why are you still taking this? And, I'm guessing I'm being a fly on the wall.
The other part of that rock bottom was, as a businessman, you invoice periodically. And after about 4 weeks of high and low, maybe 4 months of high, low, high, low, high, low, I hadn't sent a single invoice and we were running out of money. And so I think this is the only time I lied to my wife. And I told her, yeah, I'm sending invoices. So for the next 3 months, I kept saying, I'm sending invoices, I'm sending invoices. Eventually, she figured out I was full of it. So that all happened kind of around the same time as
the big rock bottom. Oh my God. Did you eventually get paid on those invoices, I hope?
No, because my work was horrible. The reason I wasn't invoicing is because I knew my work was horrible.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Oh, geez. Yeah. So this affects every area of life, right? I mean, it's affecting the money, the relationships, the trust, obviously, the work, the health, all of that. There's probably not one part that wasn't affected. So, Dave, what is your message for doctors who prescribe drugs like Phen? And if you could tell us real quick what Phen is, PHEN, and Adderall.
I would just consider it dangerous. Like when I went skydiving, I had to watch a video and take like a 3-hour course before they'd let me skydive. In my opinion, skydiving is much safer. Skydiving didn't ruin my life, nor did motorcycles and ATVs, but Adderall did. So
yeah,
they need to just educate people on how it works. Like for one thing, it'll be wonderful your first week. That doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
because it doesn't stay that way.
Right.
So the fact that you've heard from 20
Yeah.
people how wonderful it is in the first week or in the first year,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean anything, because after that year, you're going to need 2 and 3, and you're going to wind up in that dope sick type place after a while. By the way, great movie. I saw that
Yeah.
too. Michael Keaton was amazing, wasn't he?
Oh, it's so good.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
Great
That
movie.
movie was amazing. If you haven't watched it, listeners, go check it out. Dope Sick. I think it's on Netflix. There's a new one coming out called Painkiller that's going to star Matthew Broderick, also about the same story, but it's a different spin on it. And this is interesting. So I didn't know this, but the term dope sick isn't about the addiction. It's about being sick due to the withdrawal from the drugs. So you experienced that, I take it, because you were 3 months. You said 3 months, just like almost like a zombie, it sounds like.
Yeah, like with opiate. I have an opiate story for you too. I don't know if this ruins the whole thing, but
Yeah.
with
Tell.
opiates, it's a little bit different. But with Adderall, you have to work. You have to do your life, and so the main suffering of the withdrawal is just not being able to function.
Okay.
If you've
Yeah.
been
Having
taking
your
it for
energy
10
taken
years,
away. The thing that the
yeah,
pill gave you is now taken away.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I have another story which was a little bit milder, but before this, I was living in that condo I told you about, and I had this persistent cough, wouldn't go away. I had it for like 4 months. And so I went to the doctor and he gave me a bottle of cough syrup. Didn't say anything, no warnings, no videos, no half-hour training class. Just gave me a bottle. And I went and I took it, and it cured my cough. I took it for 2 weeks, but sometimes I got lazy and I didn't have a spoon. So I just got to do this.
Right.
And I one day realized, oh, I was watching the Eagles, Hell Freezes Over on DVD, and they were singing Peaceful, Easy Feeling. And I remember thinking, man, I've got a peaceful, easy feeling right now. I'm feeling good. And I didn't even realize what it was from. I
Wow.
had no idea what caused it. I just went on it for longer and longer and longer. And that one kind of came to a head when I was in Hawaii at a wedding with my wife, at your wedding,
Oh,
in
you
that awesome hotel. And so I couldn't sleep. I barely slept the whole time I was there because I had run out of cough syrup.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I didn't get, he wasn't even on that for 10 years. That stuff got you more addicted in 3 months than Adderall can in like 8 years.
Oh, wow. That's powerful. Yeah. Because you hear of young kids like taking cough syrup, but you think it's so innocent. You're like, it's over the counter, right? It's over
Oh,
the
this
counter.
wasn't over the counter.
Oh, this wasn't.
This
This
was
was,
opiate.
oh, okay.
I left out the most important part of the story. Yeah, it was an opiate. And the coming off period was like you felt jittery as heck, and you felt like literally the same thing as Adderall. Kind of how, the withdrawal is like the opposite effect of what the drug does.
Right.
With opiates, when you stop taking it, you're the most unrelaxed you've ever been.
Oh, gotcha. It's like the pendulum. It's like the pendulum
Yeah.
wants to get, yeah, that makes sense. So it's always going to do the opposite when your body doesn't have it. Wow. That's crazy. That is crazy.
I could tell you this: if I was connected with like the drug underworld, I'm such a nerd. I don't really talk to drug addicts very much. It's like you said, I wasn't one of the street drug addicts. I was just a normal guy. But if I knew a dealer, I would have gone to the next level.
Mm,
I can't get any more cough syrup. That ran out. I would have gone to find something.
if you knew it was accessible, that's an honest statement because yeah, you're in cookie cutter Orange County like we are. It's not like there's drug dealers down the corner, but a lot of people who live in a big city, there are, or they know someone who knows somebody, and it's pretty easy. In fact, it's become like incredibly easy to get drugs nowadays with all of this epidemic. And it made me think about like when you were saying the studies, like they'll say, oh, we did a study on people taking Adderall for a year, and look, at all the positive things that happen, and they won't show you anything negative. And as Ron and I have studied chemicals and toxins for over 15 years, same thing. They'll take a chemical, a toxin, and they'll test it on a 200-pound male 6 foot and say, oh, look, it didn't cause harm. Look, we tested for 2 years, everything's fine. But what about that toxin every day for 10 years? What about that toxin on a small, petite woman or a child? And so that's where a lot of these studies, people naively think a lot of this stuff is safe, but they're not, they're seeing like, a tiny view instead of a bird's eye view of what really can happen long term. And I think that's the message to you listeners. Like, if this is ringing a bell and you're on something and you're questioning it, think about that. Think about that. Just because you were told that there are no long-term studies, you might not know, they might not exist yet. They might not have been out long enough, this drug or all of that. So
It sounds like people really need outside help. So, Dave, what signs can parents, spouses, friends, or coworkers look for to determine if a loved one may be suffering from addiction?
yeah, what are
Ooh,
some telltale signs?
it's really hard
It's hard
because
because
one thing a
the
lot of people don't know about addicts, they lie.
Mm.
okay, right.
You
So
tell your doctor that every month, how's the drug working out for you? Oh, it's awesome.
mhm,
I didn't tell them I took all of it in the first 4 days, then the
right.
first week, and then
Yeah.
suffered for the rest of the 3 months.
Yeah.
So, like you said, most of the studies are 1 year, but one way you can get long-term studies is by doctors. But the thing, in other words, doctors, if they just were able to see the signs that you were just talking about, but psychiatrists, they can't see the signs. I was addicted for 8 years. My psychiatrist who prescribed that stuff to me had no idea. So
Mhm.
what I meant by 8 years is 8 years of being bad. So
Yeah, right. That's a really good point. Yeah, because I think most addicts lie. That's becomes part of the coping of how you're gonna deal with it, and they become good at lying, and so unless it's like a full-on crack addict with, like, messed up teeth and, needle marks, sometimes you don't see it. It can be your next door neighbor, your best friend, who knows, your spouse. Wow. So the author of Dope Sick states that only about 12% of people with opioid addictions can access treatment. Do you have any advice on where someone with any kind of drug addiction could start to get help and get on the road to recovery?
my health insurance Kaiser offered some of that,
Okay.
but I was on Adderall. Most of the people who were in there in this little support group was on meth or heroin or gambling. So some people think, oh, there's an addiction personality, but I never got addicted to booze. I never got addicted to gambling.
Right.
I've taken all sorts of addictive things and didn't get addicted to it. But Adderall was my thing. That's the thing that got me.
Yeah, because our body chemistry is all different. You're right. Do you find, like, in that group that addiction, because it always stems from something, right? I mean, at the root cause, like, what caused the addiction? What causes somebody to, be addicted to gambling or shopping or a drug? Do you think at the root they're the same, or do you think they're all very different?
I think they're a little bit the same,
Okay.
but also a lot different. It's a little bit controversial. Everyone has a different idea on this, and there's not that many studies. But I have a friend who's convinced all addiction is from childhood trauma. I had a wonderful childhood. I've never really had any trauma. The Adderall was the trauma.
Yeah, right.
There was no trauma that made this happen. So there's not something in my past that I'm trying to avoid. This is the biggest thing about mine. All right, I can see if you're failing jobs because you have so bad ADD. I was doing great. By anybody's measure, I was doing pretty good. I had it all. I didn't need to get better. And I didn't know it would make me get way worse.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a really good point. And like you said, it's not like you ever thought that you were doing something bad. It's not like, I mean, someone who's a gambling addict knows in the back of their mind, like, I really shouldn't go to the casino. Whereas, well, your doctor gave you this drug and he's trustworthy and he's in a white coat and, gosh, he's not going to give me something that would be harmful, right? So that explains that for sure.
If you want information on a drug, on that type of drug, the doctor is the last person you go to. The person, if you want really know, if you're considering giving your children uppers to help them in school or to make them less miserable to you around the house, Don't talk to a doctor. Talk to an addict. Find an addict. Find someone who's been addicted to that drug or a drug similar to that. That's who you want to talk to. Your doctor's not going to have any knowledge on that. Guess how many times my doctor followed up with me? How many times he called my wife and friends to see if I was acting weird? You know, I had a meeting once a month. I lied and said everything was fine for 15 minutes. He didn't recognize the signs. So when you're saying, what are the signs? I'd say the signs are almost impossible to see, unless you get to the really end of it where you say, sit in an airport for 3 days. If your husband sits in the airport for 3 days when he's in his own home airport all night, I would say that's a sign.
That's a bonk on the head, as Oprah would say. That's not even the whisper. You passed the whispers. Wow. Wow. And also you wanted to get better. So that's a huge part. Like you didn't have to have a full on intervention, like on that TV show on TLC, like where they had to fly you out. It wasn't like that dramatic, right? You were like, I want to get better. Well, because in a lot of cases where the drug addict's so bad, they have to the whole family has to come around in a circle and have the plane ready and they fly off to the rehab center, right? Have you ever seen those shows? It's pretty dramatic.
I already knew I had a problem. Like I wasn't in denial. I was maybe a little bit in denial. I didn't know how bad it was, but that day John and Jordan just started pounding on my door.
Yeah.
I just had to be honest with myself at that point. So at some point, you start lying to yourself and lying to everyone else, trying to make it seem like you're normal, but you're not.
Well, Dave, it sounds like your next step in this process is to write a book with your partner on the whole experience, your perspective, and his perspective, right?
Yeah. Well, this is great. So back to that. So someone who's listening who doesn't have insurance, do you know of any do you believe in the 12-step recovery, or anything like that? Any free resources that you're aware of where they could go if they need help?
I could have gone to one of those and I thought about it, but you kind of remember me. I'm not into the whole higher power thing. So I really didn't want to go into that direction. But I was looking, I was Googling. The other thing is there was nothing specifically for Adderall, or there wasn't even a support group that was specifically for stimulants like meth and Adderall.
Oh, wow. Really?
At least not around where I could find one, and not one that Kaiser paid for. So I don't want to sit in with a bunch of gambling addicts, and that's just not the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say
addict is different.
They should be separated for sure. They're very different. You need to relate to people who are going through the same thing. I agree. Well, if you are listening and you do need help and you can find a 12-step recovery, that's a great way to start. Also look at your church. Our church here, which is Mariners in Southern California, they actually have, and it's marinerschurch.org/care-recovery. And they have locations throughout Southern California. So churches offer free counseling and services. So if you are in a position, especially if you're addicted and you're, usually the life is spiraling out of control, you might not have the funds, you might not have insurance and things like that, but get help, get started. Let Dave be your angel on your shoulder telling you it's not worth it. Do you miss it? Do you feel like, of course, I don't mean that in a obvious way, but or are you like, no, I finally feel like my best now? Do you miss the feeling of feeling limitless?
I do. I miss it every day. Oh, limitless is about Adderall?
No, but he takes a pill. Meth? Well, okay. It could be. It's this pill where he's just like you talked about, hyper focus. He's making all this money. He's buying all this stuff. He's limitless. And the pill is it comes out and it's only for the rich and elite and people don't know about it. And he has to get it. And you should watch that one. It's good. It's really good. It's one of our favorites, Ren.
It's really good. Yeah.
It's, what's his name? What's that actor who used to be with Renee Zellweger?
Oh, he's a major actor. I don't know why we're drawing a blank. Yeah. It's
Renee Zellweger. Huh?
Oh, okay.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, you'll like that. But okay, so that's an honest answer. So you miss that feeling of feeling limitless.
I do. Yeah, I won't lie about it. What'll happen a lot of times is I know I've got work to do. And I'm like, probably like most humans, I think I'll just stay in bed today. But with that, you never want to stay in bed. You're always motivated to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Or to do something. You're definitely not going to sit in your bed and do nothing if you're on Adderall.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. So, and now is it like, what do you what do you do now to be healthier, to get that energy more? Like, you're vegan, aren't you vegan or you're vegetarian?
No, I'm not anymore. I kind of fell off of
Oh, you
that.
fell off the
During the whole
bean.
Adderall thing, that well, no, actually, I was a vegan after that, wasn't I? But so, yeah, I just got weak on that. You can probably tell by how fat my face is.
No, you look great.
No, you're strong. And
Do you do coffee? Like, do you feel like you need something to, or are you like, no, I'm just, this life is so much better. I might not have as much energy, but I'm clear headed and I have a great life.
Yeah, I try to, in my family, not let our kids start on stimulants like coffee or Diet Cokes and that kind of thing. Because if you're wired a certain way, not the addictive personality, but just some if you're really amenable to those uppers. And whether it's Diet Coke, coffee, Broncaid, Fen, meth, Adderall, they're all basically the same thing. They're just a stimulant. So
Yeah. Cause it's hard to be given something that makes you feel better and then have that taken away. Let's be honest, right? I mean, who doesn't want to feel more energetic? And so, you can see how that can happen. It's like you got a little taste of how great that feels. Now we're going to take it away. So, listeners, I mean, obviously we're all about healthy living. You're not going to feel like unlimited with work, but we have so many tips on how to get that energy, whether that's, eating a clean organic diet, eating more plants. Raw food gives you lots and lots and lots of energy. Ron and I did a raw food diet, a cleanse for 2 weeks, and I thought I was bouncing off the wall. Like, it would have to do 2 workouts because one workout I didn't feel like I worked out enough. So there's natural ways to get that energy. Meditation gives you
much
a
better
lot of
choice.
what's that? A better
Much better
choice.
choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of chopping, lots of veggies. It's hard to do every day, but and the reason that raw food diet does that is because it's not cooked and the enzymes aren't killed. So instead of your body having to work twice as hard to digest food, all those enzymes are now available in your body for energy versus having to use it to digest food. And that's why you feel so energetic when you eat raw. I will say it's not easy to do every day, but even going on cleanses like that is really good for your body to reset your metabolism and feel what that feels like. I remember, Ron, we went to the restaurant and we said to the chef, this is weird. We came in here and ate and we were both so energetic. We were doing double workouts and she looked at us and she goes, yeah, that's why people go on raw food diets.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
duh. We never knew. We were like, oh, okay. So there's a lot and like natural coffee alternatives. I agree with you, Dave. I didn't grow up drinking coffee. That wasn't a thing. I don't know. When I grew up, no one drank. Teenagers didn't drink coffee. There was no Starbucks. And so saving that stuff for later and making that stuff like a treat versus like a habit is such a good point and such a good, lesson for people.
And then Dave, you are
Yeah,
such a great person. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Good.
the reason the prescription drugs are so much more dangerous than recreational drugs, in my opinion, recreational drugs you only do like when you're recreating.
Yeah.
Whereas by definition, the medicine the doctor gives you, you take every day. Probably if I had booze every day, I might become an alcoholic, but I don't. So I've done all sorts of things once, like you said, as a treat. But that's not how prescription drugs work. You do them every day.
Yeah. You're taking them every day. And, I think the medical system is broken. The Western medical system is broken in so many ways. And that doctors finish medical school and then and they become glorified drug pushers a lot of the time. And their information isn't based on necessarily what they learned in med school. It's what the pharmaceutical rep tells them. The pharmaceutical rep feeds them the study and feeds them, oh, this is safe. Like in the movie Dope Sick, the doctors are told by the reps, this isn't addictive. And that was the biggest thing.
And the reps are told by the company that it's perfectly safe too. It's like
The
this
reps are
circle of
told by the company. They
ignorance
go to
that's
the
pushed upon the
conferences, they listen
consumer.
to Yeah. So you can see how that trickles down to where everything's regurgitated. There isn't really like even hard science behind a lot. It's the pharmaceutical companies providing the science themselves, right? And so you get the doctors just kind of regurgitating and pill pushing, like you said. So anyone going in for ADHD is going to leave with a prescription because that's what they do. There is no other. They don't give you options, right? They don't say, "Hey, let's talk about like." I don't know, different modalities for dealing with hyperactivity. You know, how else could we do it? Maybe meditation or yoga. They're not going to tell you that, right? They're not going to.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to deal with it. Sitting in the classroom isn't for everybody. Sitting all day staring at a teacher, that's just not for everybody. Some people need to move around.
Right,
Some
right.
people need, Robin Williams, he's got ADD out the yin yang. So
You're right. Good example.
you don't have to always fix it with a drug. You just have to realize I'm not going to live my life the way these people do. Or this is true with probably Asperger's and other things. Dyslexia. You adapt your life to it. You don't become a drug addict.
Exactly. And I do think schools need to start embracing the differences in children and the differences in like what they're attracted to, what are those schools? Does your wife teach at one where they do that more, where they say, hey, Johnny's better at art. We're going to give him more art classes. And, Cindy loves math. So we're going to focus. Is that
Yeah.
what she does?
But I would say there's people who learn without even going to school.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right.
There's like the 80% life that everybody lives. But if you're in the 20%, you might need to live a different life. Come up with coping mechanisms. One of my coping mechanisms, Lisa might remember this, I carry what I call a man purse everywhere I go. Because if you have ADD, you're going to lose your wallet, your keys, or forget where all that stuff is. So I carry this black backpack with me everywhere I go. And everyone was like, why you got that? I go, hey, if women can have one, I can have one.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, now everybody has a backpack, men too. Yeah, Dave, I remember you I would sign you up for all the airline mile programs and all the hotels and every single thing. And I got you like a little booklet to keep it all in. And you'd be like, oops, I left it on the plane. I'd be like, because I was Dave's assistant. I didn't say that at the beginning, but I worked for Dave way back when. We had so much fun.
I will say I have never had an assistant as good as Lisa, ever.
Aw, thank you. That's so nice. And now I have an assistant. We passed the baton, Dave.
Oh, awesome.
No, that's great. We had so much. I mean, those are some just amazing days back when we were like the Friends before Friends really was as popular, right? We were the Friends group. We just had a blast. So many funny memories. So thank you for sharing your story. Is there anything else that you would want to leave with listeners? Any last piece of advice, or you really covered a lot?
Just remember, it's as dangerous as a motorcycle. Think of it like a motorcycle. If you're going to let your kids drive a motorcycle. Yeah,
exactly.
If you think that's not so safe, then probably the Adderall is less safe than a motorcycle.
Great point.
All right. Well, hey, Dave, we really appreciate you. You've done such an amazing job. You're a big voice for this now, right? You probably didn't even intend to do this, but you're helping so many people just from this and other moments. You're a living example of how to live your truth. You're positive. You're great. Good things are happening to you. You just gave today. It's coming back to you in an even bigger way, Dave. So thank you so much for spreading this information to everyone today.
And we'll have all the links in the show notes at ronandlisa.com/podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode and get ready, guys, to up-level your health. Bye, friends.
Bye.
Bye.
This episode of the Healthy Home Hacks podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more healthy living strategies and tactics to help you create the healthy home you've always dreamed of. And don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best content. See you on the next episode.